Vorthel's claw slams against the holographic display, dispersing the message into particles of light. "Find this, barista," he hisses to his intelligence chief. "I want to know how a beverage server breached our security." The intelligence chief, Nexvar, bows stiffly. "Supreme General, initial scans show nothing remarkable about the human female. Age 29, no military implants, no combat augmentations. Her public records show student loans for a degree in art history and small business management." "Then how did she access our systems?" Vorthal demands, mandibles clicking in agitation. Nexvar hesitates. "We don't believe she did, sir. The message appears to have been inserted through our own communication protocols, as if someone knew our encryption sequences." In the streets below, Sarah walks briskly through morning crowds, a fitness tracker on her wrist quietly transmitting encrypted data bursts to receivers hidden throughout the city. Her hands, steady while serving aliens coffee yesterday, now tremble slightly as adrenaline courses through her system. Not from fear, but from the familiar rush of an operation in motion. 10 years earlier, she'd been climbing through mountain passes in hostile territory, communications equipment disguised as hiking gear. 5 years before that, she'd infiltrated a terrorist cell while maintaining cover as a university exchange student. Now, at 29, she was officially retired from field operations until the ships appeared in Earth's skies. She ducks into a subway station, using the electromagnetic interference to mask the exchange of data chips with a street musician whose saxophone case contains more processing power than most research labs. They never acknowledge each other directly. Just two strangers passing on a busy platform. They're scanning for military signatures. She murmurs into her phone, appearing to any observer as just another commuter making a call. Focus on assets with no service record. Aboard that Selnar flagship, Kelvira reviews first contact protocols in her cramped research station. Unlike her warrior case colleagues, her exoskeleton lacks battle enhancements, instead optimized for sensory input and data processing. She runs footage of the diplomatic meeting again, focusing on background humans, the ones her colleagues dismissed as irrelevant. "Computer, analyze micro-expressions and pupil dilation of human observers," she commands. The results flag 12 humans showing combat readiness indicators despite no military markings. The barista is among them, her casual movements revealing microsecond moments of perfect situational awareness. "Fascinating," Kelvira whispers. They hide in plain sight. A sharp chime interrupts her research. The missing officers have been found. Or rather, their bodies have. Each killed with ruthless efficiency, with different methods but identical precision. One with a neurotoxin that shouldn't exist in human pharmacology. Another with vertebrae dislocated at exactly the point where Selnar neurological systems are most vulnerable. Knowledge that wasn't in any public database. The third through what appeared to be a catastrophic allergic reaction to an Earth substance, but targeted specifically to his unique biochemistry. The security chief slams his report onto Vorthal's desk. These humans are primitive, but their intelligence gathering is unprecedented. They'd weaponized information we didn't know they had. In her apartment above the coffee shop, Sarah reviews thermal imaging of the Selnar flagship captured by modified weather satellites. She identifies power fluctuations indicating weapons systems coming online. The invasion timetable has accelerated. She opens a secure channel to reactivated agents worldwide. Her message is simple. Ghost protocol initiated. They're coming sooner than expected. Prepare your communities. Across Earth, thousands of individuals, teachers, nurses, office workers, retirees, receive variations of the same alert. People whose neighbors and coworkers would never suspect their true capabilities begin making preparations, not in military bases or government facilities, but in suburban homes, urban apartments, rural farmhouses, and village shops. The real defense of Earth was never going to be fought by soldiers in uniform. The strike commander's talons gripped the throat of the Pentagon analyst. "Impossible. How did you know our attack strategy?" She struggles for breath but maintains eye contact. You walked through our building taking pictures. Did you think we wouldn't notice? He throws her aside in disgust. Your primitive surveillance couldn't decode our quantum encrypted communications. We didn't need to. She wheezes, a thin smile forming. We just needed to see where you were looking. The Selnar Invasion Command Center buzzes with crisis alerts. Commander Dreztak smashes his fist through a holographic display. Find me a pattern in these attacks. His tactical officer, exoskeleton humming with combat enhancements, projects a global map highlighting simultaneous system failures. No discernible pattern, sir. Different methods, different targets, different human demographics in each location. Demographics. The commander seizes on the word. Explain. In Delhi, an elderly electrician. In Johannesburg, a teenage male. In Sydney, a food service worker. Nothing connects these humans except their access to our systems. And their lack of military designation, adds Kelvira, entering uninvited. The warriors bristle at her presence, but her next words freeze them. I've identified a significant anomaly in human information systems. Their formal military structures are visible, but there's a shadow layer. Veterans who return to civilian life, intelligence operatives officially retired, combat specialists working in ordinary sectors. She projects records of Sarah, the barista. This female has visited 17 countries in the past decade. Her financial records show a coffee shop barely breaking even, yet she has no debt beyond standard education loans. Her social media presence begins only 8 years ago, with artificial aging applied to earlier photos. Dreztak's eyes narrow. A cover identity. One of thousands, potentially millions. Kelvira confirms. Humans rotate their warriors between visible and invisible status. They don't maintain permanent warrior castes like every other known species. In the Underwater Command Center, Admiral Chen studies the Selnar battle formations adapting to Earth's counterattacks. Beside him, Miguel, the former Pentagon janitor, scrubs security footage showing his face. They're learning, Chen notes, beginning to avoid locations with high concentrations of former military personnel. Miguel nods. That's why we activated the civilians with no connection to formal service. On a screen, they watch a kindergarten teacher in Kyoto carefully dismantle a Selnar surveillance drone, while her 5-year-old students nap. Her file appears. Yumi Tanaka, 34, no military record, but her grandfather was a master craftsman who built precision watches, skills passed down through generations. Chen touches his earpiece. Ghost Node 7 is compromised. The Selnar are starting to check professional histories going back 3 generations. Miguel smiles grimly. Then we activate the naturals. Confirm authorization, Chen demands. The naturals have no training, which makes them completely untraceable, Miguel counters. And you've seen their aptitude scores. In suburban Melbourne, 16-year-old Aiden pauses his video game when his phone chimes with a seemingly random notification. Your library books are overdue. His expression shifts from teenage boredom to focused intensity. He opens his laptop, navigating to an online chess tournament where each move corresponds to a decryption key. The message resolves. Phase 3. Natural talent activation. Coordinates and equipment drop locations attached. Mission. Disable communications at nearest occupation outpost using provided specifications. No prior tactics. Improvise only. Aiden studies the schematics of alien technology that somehow make perfect sense to him, despite never seeing them before. His fingers tap restlessly on the desk, the same fingers that can manipulate virtual environments with preternatural skill, that can discern patterns invisible to others. He was never trained as a soldier. He has no connection to any military or intelligence service. His parents work in insurance and accounting. But his mind processes spatial relationships and systemic vulnerabilities in ways that defy standard metrics. This is humanity's deepest layer of defense. Individuals with natural aptitudes that would never appear in any database, Never trigger any pattern recognition algorithm looking for traditional combat indicators. As Aiden gathers supplies from around his ordinary bedroom, thousands like him across the planet receive similar activations. The Xelnar, still searching for the hidden warriors among the retired soldiers and intelligence operatives, remain unaware that an entirely different class of human threat has just entered the field, camouflaged not by training, but by their very ordinariness. Vorthal summons his elite guard to his quarters, mandibles twitching with barely controlled rage. Sweep for surveillance. Every molecule. As armored warriors scan the room with increasingly sensitive equipment, Vorthal reviews the security footage frame by frame. The janitor, designation H4472 in their tracking system, had passed through 7 security checkpoints. Each scan confirmed. No weapons, no implants, no augmentations, heart rate, and body temperature within normal human parameters, no synthetic components beyond a dental filling. There, Vorthal freezes the image. For exactly 1.3 seconds, the janitor's eyes had locked directly with the hidden camera, a camera whose location was classified at the highest levels. He knew, Vorthal whispers, and he wanted us to know he knew. The security scan completes with no results. No bugs, no transmitters, no surveillance devices. How? Vorthal demands of the empty air. How did you access my terminal? In a small apartment in Lima, Peru, the janitor, whose real name is Gabriel Ortiz, sits at a makeshift workstation, his worn hands now flying across a custom interface. He's 67, with arthritis in his knuckles and a replaced hip that aches when it rains. 30 years ago, he'd been a systems engineer for NASA before family obligations pulled him back to Peru. 20 years before that, he'd served in special operations, though no record of this service exists in any accessible database. Terminal access confirmed. He reports through a quantum-encrypted channel. The message is delivered. His contact, visible only as a silhouette, replies, "Was visual confirmation necessary? It increases your risk profile." Gabriel's weathered face cracks into a smile. I wanted to see his eyes. Besides, my risk profile was always terminal. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer gives certain liberties. The silhouette softens. Understood. Your contribution is noted. Ghost Elder. One last thing, Gabriel adds, wincing as he shifts position. They're neural interfaces. They're not just for ship control. They're recording everything. Sensory data, emotional responses, tactical assessments, all fed back to some central repository. They're learning collectively. Across the Pacific, Kelvera isolates herself in her research pod, security protocols engaged to maximum. Her latest findings are too dangerous to share through normal channels. The human capacity for deception extends beyond anything in Selnarian evolutionary history. She compiles footage from 17 human entertainment sources, films, and television series showing ordinary individuals transforming into deadly combatants when threatened. What her colleagues dismiss as primitive fantasy, she recognizes as cultural programming. Humans literally training their young through entertainment to reveal hidden capabilities under stress. More disturbing are her analyses of human neural patterns. Unlike Selnarian brains, which developed specialized regions for combat, strategy, and aggression, human brains show remarkable plasticity. The same neural pathways activate whether they're playing games, solving puzzles, or engaging in combat simulations. They don't separate warfare from other activities. She murmurs in horrified fascination. It's all pattern recognition to them. Her research interface chimes with an encrypted alert from the linguistics division. The human language team has discovered something alarming. Idioms and expressions across human cultures repeatedly reference hidden strengths, concealed abilities, and ordinary people performing extraordinary feats under pressure. The quiet ones, still waters run deep, wolf in sheep's clothing. 1,000 variations on the same theme. This wasn't just a military strategy. This was encoded in their very concept of self. In the residential sector of the flagship, A human cultural attaché named David Kim serves tea to a mid-leveled Selnar diplomatic officer. Kim's credentials show an unexceptional academic background in cultural studies. Fascinating how similar our customs can be, Kim observes, gracefully pouring the steaming liquid. The sharing of prepared plant infusions as a social ritual. That Selnar officer, lulled by the human's seeming harmlessness, misses how Kim's eyes catalog every reaction, how his casual questions elicit crucial information about crew rotations and security protocols. He doesn't notice that the teacup's design creates specific fingerprint patterns that Kim will later use to bypass biometric controls. Kim was never a soldier. He was an anthropologist whose fieldwork studying tribal conflicts had honed observational skills that no scanning technology could detect. In Selnar terms, he was a civilian. In human reality, the distinction had always been meaningless. Dr. Eleanor Singh watches the Selnar guards shift positions at the back of her lecture hall. Their mandibles twitch whenever she gestures toward ancient Mesopotamian battle formations. The Assyrians, she continues, voice steady despite the weighted attention, understood psychological warfare. Their soldiers looked identical, creating the impression of a unified, perfect killing machine. A student raises her hand. Like the Selnar exoskeletons, the guard's posture stiffens. Eleanor smiles. Precisely. Uniformity as intimidation, the opposite of guerrilla tactics, where fighters blend with civilian populations. It's not just a history lesson, it's a coded message to her students. Study how they move, notice their patterns, remember their weaknesses. After class, a Selnar officer scans her again with increasingly sophisticated equipment. Your right hip shows evidence of replacement. Explain. Fell rock climbing 15 years ago. She responds, the lie flowing easily. The truth, a bullet wound from an operation in Damascus, remains locked behind mental barriers even their best scanners can't penetrate. The officer leans closer. We've updated your file, Professor. Your publications on ancient warfare techniques suggest specialized knowledge. Just academic interest, she demurs. I find violence fascinating precisely because I've never experienced it. In his private quarters, Vorthal studies holographic projections of captured resistance members. Every scan categorizes them as non-combatants. A florist with arthritis, a web designer with asthma, a retired accountant. Yet each had executed operations requiring specialized knowledge of Selnar systems. They're not augmented, his medical officer reports. No combat drugs, no enhanced reflexes, no neural implants. Physically unremarkable. Then how? Vorthal demands, talons digging into his armrest. The answer comes from an unexpected source. A human child, approximately 6 Earth years old, wanders into the secure area, somehow bypassing 3 checkpoints. Before guards can react, she stares directly at Vorthal. My mommy says your shells are pretty, but your eyes are in the wrong place. The guards rush forward, scanners humming. The child, completely ordinary by all readings, is escorted out while security protocols are again overhauled. What the scans miss, the child's neural patterns, still developing, forming connections at rates impossible for adult brains. Her observation about eyes in the wrong place is stored in the resistance database, a crucial anatomical detail about Selnar peripheral vision limitations that sensors couldn't detect. In Buenos Aires, 16-year-old Mateo sits cross-legged in a park facing an occupied Selnar facility. To observers, he appears to be playing with a handheld gaming device. In reality, the modified console broadcasts signals that mimic Selnar environmental control systems, gradually raising humidity levels inside their facility. No one instructed him specifically how to do this. The Resistance provided basic information about Selnar environmental vulnerabilities, and Mateo, who had been designing homebrew game modifications since age 12, improvised the solution using salvaged components. Kilometers away, the skateboarder who had reconfigured Selnar weapons returns to the hidden Resistance hub, carrying fragments of alien technology. Marina Torres, age 19, dumps the components on a workbench where 3 other teenagers immediately begin disassembling them. Their targeting systems depend on electromagnetic signatures, she explains, pointing to a crystalline node. But I notice they can't track anything moving in perfect rhythm with their own ship's pulse frequency. How did you figure that out? Asks the resistance coordinator, a former physics teacher. Marina shrugs. Video game logic. If you move exactly in sync with an enemy pattern, you become invisible to their detection system. I just had to find their pattern. The coordinator shares a significant look with his lieutenant. This is why the naturals are so effective. They approach alien technology without preconceptions, seeing patterns that trained soldiers miss because of standardized thinking. In his increasingly isolated command center, Vorthal receives another disturbing report. Occupation forces are experiencing accelerating failure rates in peripheral systems, environmental controls, food synthesis, waste management, seemingly minor functions until they all begin failing simultaneously. It's the children, Kelvira suggests, reviewing incident reports. We've been focusing our security on adults with potential military background, while ignoring their young. Children cannot be combatants, Vorthal dismisses. Not in our society, Kelvira counters. But humans permit their young to explore, experiment, and develop skills independently from very early ages. Their neural plasticity makes them perfect asymmetrical operators. They solve problems in ways our logical systems can't predict. For the first time in his military career, Vorthal feels a sensation previously unknown to his species, the cold certainty that he is facing an enemy he cannot categorize, cannot predict, and therefore cannot defeat. Thomas Chen's apparent defection to the Excelnar causes ripples through resistance networks. His brother James, operating under deep cover in the Tokyo occupation zone, receives the news with carefully controlled emotions. He was always ambitious, James tells his cell members, his tone perfectly calibrated to suggest disappointment masking approval. The performance serves 2 purposes, maintaining his cover and feeding Selnar surveillance exactly what they expect to hear, human pettiness and betrayal. What the surveillance misses is the microscopic pause in James's speech pattern, a signal to other operatives that Thomas's defection is authorized and strategic. In Rio de Janeiro, Thomas himself walks the gleaming corridors of Selnar Logistics Command, his unassuming manner and helpful efficiency earning him increasing access. Commander Zexnar has begun consulting him on matters beyond simple resource allocation. Your insight into supply chain vulnerabilities is impressive, the commander notes, mandibles relaxed in the Selnar equivalent of trust. Just pattern recognition, Thomas demurs. In my previous work auditing multinational corporations, I identified similar inefficiencies. The truth is more complex. Thomas had indeed been an auditor for a counterintelligence agency specializing in tracking financial warfare. His apparent helpfulness is a carefully calculated operation to map the entire Selnar logistics network while introducing untraceable weaknesses. Today, he presents Zexnar with a proposal to optimize fuel routing that, if implemented, will create a critical vulnerability 5 weeks later, long after the changes are forgotten in routine operations. Brilliant, Zexnar approves, authorizing implementation across the Southern Hemisphere. With humans like you, perhaps coexistence is possible after all. Thomas smiles modestly. I've always believed in pragmatism over ideology. Meanwhile, in occupied territories, Selnar forces begin recruiting additional human collaborators, offering increasingly generous incentives. Hundreds come forward, some from genuine self-interest, others as resistance plants. The Selnar believe their sophisticated truth detection systems can differentiate between genuine collaborators and spies. They're wrong. What they don't understand is that humans can compartmentalize beliefs to a degree impossible for Selnarian neurology. A resistance member can genuinely believe in cooperation at a surface level while maintaining deeper loyalties, a cognitive dissonance that appears to Selnar scanners as truthfulness. In Shanghai, Lai Wei, a grandmother of 3 who runs a small noodle shop, passes every Xelnar loyalty screening with perfect scores. Her scanner readings show genuine concern when she reports suspicious activities in her neighborhood. The Xelnar make her a block informant, trusting her completely. They never discover that the suspicious activities she reports are carefully staged by resistance members to distract from actual operations elsewhere. Her genuine concern comes from knowing those fake operatives risk exposure to protect the real network, which she helps coordinate through a system of food deliveries containing encoded messages. 10-year-old Mai skips through another checkpoint, her pigtails bouncing as she waves cheerfully to the guards who have grown accustomed to her presence. Today, her stuffed rabbit contains miniature electromagnetic pulse generators that will temporarily disable Xelnar communication arrays when activated. "Hello, Mr. Blueshell." She chirps to a guard whose exoskeleton has distinctive cerulean markings. Her innocent nickname for him conceals her role cataloging individual Xelnar for the Resistance database. The guard, touched by what he interprets as childish friendliness, bends down. "Hello, little one. Visiting your mother again." May nods enthusiastically. She works in the big building. She says you keep us safe. What the guard doesn't realize, Mai has perfect recall. Every word he speaks, every detail of the checkpoint layout, every change in security protocol, all memorized and later shared with her actual mother, a resistance cell leader who has never set foot in the big building. That Xelnar Security Division finally identifies Thomas Chen as the source of cascading logistical failures. But by then, he has vanished, leaving behind carefully manufactured evidence implicating 3 high-ranking Xelnar officers as saboteurs. The subsequent interrogations and executions create deep fissures in the command structure as paranoia spreads. Who can be trusted when humans can manifest as both genuine allies and perfect infiltrators? When collaboration itself becomes suspect, the occupation begins to implode from within. In Vorthal's private war room, a new message appears on his terminal. "We don't need to defeat your army. You're doing that yourselves." The signature chills him more than any previous communication. From the Children of Earth. The High Council transmission ends with the matriarch's final warning. "Solve this human problem or be replaced, Supreme General." As the communication cuts, Vorthal slams his armored fist into the nearest surface, cracking the reinforced alloy. 7 months of failed conquest have depleted not just Xelnar resources, but his personal standing in the Imperium. Decades of victories now overshadowed by this inexplicable stalemate with primitives. The pragmatist faction gains influence daily, his political officer warns. Kelvira's research on human adaptability has convinced 3 council elders to support withdrawal. Her research is flawed, Vorthal hisses. She sympathizes with these creatures. Her data is compelling. The officer counters cautiously, and the casualties continue to mount. Outside the command center, the ideological divide within Xelnar forces grows visible. Pragmatist officers adopt subtle modifications to their exoskeletons, smoother edges, less prominent weapons arrays, signaling their alignment. Hardliners respond by enhancing their battle decorations, some going so far as to display human trophies. Kelvira, once relegated to a minor research position, now leads a growing contingent advocating for strategic withdrawal. Her latest presentation to mid-level officers ends with a stunning revelation. Humans don't just hide their warriors, they create them as needed. She displays footage from 17 different occupation zones, civilians with no prior combat indicators transforming into effective resistance fighters within weeks of Xelnar arrival. Their neural plasticity allows rapid skill acquisition, she explains, and their social structures facilitate knowledge transfer outside formal hierarchies. A former combat engineer can train hundreds through informal channels invisible to our surveillance. A hardliner interrupts. "So we eliminate all humans with potential combat knowledge. That would necessitate exterminating approximately 60% of their adult population," Kelvira counters. Their educational systems deliberately cross-train specialties. Their entertainment media contains detailed technical information disguised as fiction. Even their children's games involve strategic thinking and resource management applicable to warfare. As her influence grows, Kelvira establishes unauthorized communication with human representatives, seeking to end the conflict before it destroys both sides. In Sao Paulo, resistance leadership debates how to respond to these overtures. General Rivera, formerly a florist specializing in exotic arrangements, studies Kelvira's proposal with skeptical eyes. It could be an elaborate trap, her intelligence officer suggests. Rivera shakes her head. Our sources in their command structure confirm the factional divide is genuine. The question is how to exploit it. The strategy they devise is quintessentially human. Psychological warfare targeting Selmar insecurities. Resistance operatives carefully leak different information to each faction, giving pragmatists evidence of hardliner atrocities, while providing hardliners with apparent proof that pragmatists have been compromised. When Kelvira's diplomatic shuttle departs for a secret meeting with human representatives, hardliner forces move to intercept, believing the information that she carries critical security protocols. Pragmatist vessels respond, creating the first open conflict between Selmar factions. On Earth, ordinary citizens witness the spectacle of alien ships firing upon each other in orbit. News spreads through alternative channels. Chalk markings on walls, patterns in hanging laundry, coded references in public radio broadcasts, bypassing Selmar information controls. They're fighting each other now. Whispers spread through occupied territories. They don't understand us. In his university office, Professor Haruki Tanaka, specialist in game theory and conflict resolution, watches the orbital battle through powerful binoculars. Though never formally part of any resistance group, he's been analyzing Selmar behavior patterns since their arrival, developing predictive models of their decision-making. Stage 1 complete. He murmurs into a secure channel. Factional conflict achieved earlier than projected. The response comes from Admiral Chen. Assessment of complete Selmar withdrawal timeline. Tanaka consults his complex probability matrices, mathematical models that began as theoretical exercises in his academic work years before aliens arrived. At current escalation rates between 42 and 68 days, he reports, less if we introduce variables to accelerate their mistrust. Recommendations. Target their unifying beliefs, Tanaka suggests. Their warrior code, their hierarchy, their sense of superiority. If they can no longer trust what makes them Selmar, their command structure will collapse from within. In orbit, the battle intensifies as ships loyal to different factions abandon their conquest of Earth to fight each other. Human resistance watches and waits, gathering intelligence that will prove invaluable when the surviving Selnar eventually turn their attention back to Earth. The World Breaker's central control chamber hums with ominous energy. Vorfall studies the targeting interface, talons hovering over the activation sequence. His once pristine command armor bears the scars of 7 assassination attempts. 3 from humans, 4 from his own kind as the Selnar civil war intensifies. Final preparations complete. Supreme General, reports the weapons officer, mandibles tight with tension. Atmospheric ignition calibrated for Earth's oxygen content. Vorthal stares at the holographic representation of the blue planet. Send the final warning to human leadership. When silence is the only response, rage flickers across his features. They dare ignore our ultimatum. Perhaps they don't believe we would destroy such a resource-rich world, suggests his executive officer, Zex Troll. The pragmatist faction has widely distributed Kelvira's economic assessments of Earth's value. Then we will demonstrate our resolve, Vorthal declares. Begin targeting sequence. The command goes unacknowledged. The weapons officer frantically manipulates controls that no longer respond. Throughout the bridge, systems flash warnings in Selnarian script. Authorization protocols have been altered. The officer reports, confusion evident in his posture. The system requires new validation codes. Override. Vorthal demands. Impossible, sir. The core programming has been fundamentally rewritten. Every screen on the bridge flickers and displays the simple human message. We warned you. Look behind you. Vorthal spins, suddenly aware of subtle differences in his bridge crew's movements. His executive officer, Zextrol, steps forward with fluid grace, unlike any Xelnar's natural gait. Computer, Zextrol speaks in perfect English. Execute protocol Trojan horse. Aboard the vessel, Xelnar neural interfaces activate simultaneously without authorization. Through these direct brain connections flows not commands but revelation, a carefully constructed sequence of images and data showing how the humans had been preparing for this confrontation for decades. In the resulting chaos, Vorthal's personal guard turns weapons on each other, confusion and paranoia reaching breaking point as neural implants override conscious control. Vorthal alone remains unaffected, having always refused neural augmentation out of traditional warrior pride. He stares at his executive officer, his most trusted subordinate for 7 years, with dawning horror. What are you? Zextrol, or rather James Chen, allows his Xelnar vocal emulator to deactivate, revealing his human voice. I'm what you never understood about us. I'm adaptation itself. The transformation of a human into a convincing Xelnar had required technologies reverse-engineered from the aliens' own observation outposts. Surgeons had reconstructed Chen's skeletal structure using materials that mimicked Xelnarian biology. Neurologists had remapped his motor functions to move convincingly in an exoskeleton. Linguists had perfected his command of all 7 Xelnarian dialect families. All this made possible because humans had discovered Xelnar scouts decades earlier but chosen to study rather than confront them. Why? Vorthal demands, still processing the impossible deception. Why subject yourself to such mutilation? Chen's altered face cannot form a human smile, but his eyes convey the expression. Because sacrifice for the greater good isn't unique to Xelnar warrior culture. Our soldiers have always been willing to become whatever was necessary, even the enemy. On Earth, in a hardened bunker beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, Dr. Eliza Chen monitors her brother's vital signs through quantum-entangled particles embedded in his modified body. Beside her stands Thomas Chen, recently extracted from his deep cover operation. Neural stress indicators are spiking, she reports, fingers dancing across specialized controls. The Xelnar implants are fighting his human consciousness again. He only needs to maintain control for 7 more minutes. Thomas responds, checking the countdown timer. Long enough for our teams to secure the secondary control systems. Eliza nods grimly. Both understand the probability that their brother won't survive this mission. James had known it too when volunteering for the most extreme deep cover operation in human history. His psychological profile had made him the perfect candidate, adaptable, detail-oriented, and possessed of extraordinary compartmentalization abilities developed during his previous career as a trauma surgeon. Aboard the Worldbreaker, Chen completes the takeover sequence as human operatives emerge from hiding places throughout the vessel. Some had infiltrated as maintenance workers, others had been surgically modified to pass as Xelnar support staff. All had waited for this precise moment, when the planet killer weapon was deployed but before it could be activated. The Worldbreaker is now under Earth control, Chen announces as humans secure the bridge. As are 6 of your remaining cruisers. Through the viewport, Vorthal watches in stunned disbelief as his escort vessels turn their weapons toward his command ship, commandeered through the same neural interface, vulnerabilities his scientists had dismissed as theoretically impossible to exploit. The ultimate evidence of humanity's unique danger stands before him, a species willing and able to transform themselves into their enemy, to think as their enemy, to become their enemy, all to ensure survival. No Xelnar could comprehend such a fundamental violation of self. The Galactic Council chambers fall silent as Sarah Chen concludes Earth's first formal address. Representatives from 17 spacefaring species exchange troubled glances, their translation devices struggling with concepts that have no equivalent in their languages. The Mrevlonian High Commander, 7 feet of genetically engineered muscle and bone crowned with glowing battle crests, approaches Sarah during the reception. His species has bred specialized warrior castes for millennia, each marked with distinctive bioluminescent patterns denoting their combat function. "Your strategy disturbs the council," he admits, massive frame looming over her diminutive form. Not the victory itself, but the implications. Sarah sips her champagne, her grandmother's smile never wavering. "Which implications trouble you most, Commander?" "That your kind refuses to distinguish yourselves," he rumbles. "Every civilized species marks its warriors. It is necessary for social order." Sarah gestures toward the diverse gathering. Yet each species does so differently. The Troll use scent markers invisible to us. The Hexavil tattoo their combat specialists. Your people have bioluminescence. Zelnarians have exoskeleton modifications. But all mark them somehow. The commander insists. It is a galactic constant until humanity. In a private chamber adjoining the reception, Kelvira, now supreme mediator of the reformed Selnar Cooperative, reviews security footage of Earth's delegation. Her specialized research equipment analyzes minute behavioral patterns, seeking to categorize which humans present the greatest potential threat. The results confound her expectations. The elderly botanical specialist discussing native Earth flora with Troll delegates shows combat readiness indicators exceeding the obvious security personnel. The young technical advisor manipulating holographic displays exhibits perfect awareness of every exit and line of sight. The medical officer treating a Hexal diplomat for allergic reaction has reflexes suggesting extensive combat training. "Still analyzing us?" Sarah Chen asks, entering without announcement. Kelvira doesn't startle. Scientific curiosity. "Your species remains a fascinating anomaly." "As does yours," Sarah counters. "The speed of your cultural reformation is unprecedented. From conquest-driven imperium to cooperative government in less than a standard year." "Necessity drives adaptation," Kelvira responds, a concept humanity understands well. Their conversation is interrupted by an urgent message. A centuries-old conflict between the Dravkor and Abyssan empires has erupted into open warfare at their contested border. The Council is requesting immediate peacekeeping intervention. "Our forces are still recovering," Kelvira notes. "The Mrevlonians have the nearest battle fleet, but their intervention would likely escalate tensions." Sarah's expression shifts subtly, the grandmother vanishing, replaced by something cooler and more calculated. "Earth can provide peacekeepers, neutral parties with conflict resolution experience." The Council accepts with suspicious speed. Within 48 hours, human mediators deploy to the conflict zone. Ordinary men and women with backgrounds in diplomacy, cultural anthropology, and dispute resolution. They carry no visible weapons. They wear no armor. They display no obvious military bearing. The fighting stops within days of their arrival. When questioned by bewildered Council observers, the Dravkor general gestures toward the human negotiation team. "How can we know which ones might eliminate us if negotiations fail? Better to accept reasonable terms." 10 years later, human diplomatic compounds dot contested territories throughout the galaxy. Their architecture is deliberately transparent, their personnel rotations unpredictable, their capabilities purposely ambiguous. Species that have warred for generations find reasons to compromise when human mediators enter the equation. In a secure facility on Mars, the original resistance leadership, now the Civilian Defense Analysis Committee, reviews galactic security reports. Admiral Chen, his hair now gray, studies threat assessments from 17 sectors. "The Mrevlonians are increasing military production," notes General Rivera. "Intelligence suggests they fear our expanding influence." "Let them," Chen replies. "Their warriors announce themselves with glowing crests. Ours announce themselves with nothing at all." On Earth, a museum opens on the former site of the Selnar command post in New York. The centerpiece exhibit, an ordinary coffee cup displayed in a heavily secured case. The plaque reads, "First Contact Artifact." Standard ceramic mug containing quantum scanning technology that mapped the entire Xelnar fleet. Operated by Sarah Chen, intelligence operative. Visitors often overlook it, drawn instead to more impressive alien technology on display. But occasionally, someone lingers, understanding that the most dangerous weapon humanity ever deployed wasn't the technology, but the barista who served it with a smile.